This conference will now be recorded.
It is 6 PM, so we'll call to order the Monterey Select Board October 26th meeting at 6 PM. We are all present here in Town Hall. And the first item on our agenda is meeting with a member of the Board of Assessors for tax rate classification hearing.
Is he coming down the hall or is he up there?
He's neither.
Okay.
I heard that he'll be here in a few minutes.
Okay.
So.
Let's give it to him.
Scott Jensen is here, but
And
he's not on the Board of Assessors.
too many, there's like Scott's,
Who's Lori
Jim's,
McCarthy?
like,
Yeah, I have a son, Scott, so it
and
knows,
Our new
Steve,
set,
Steve.
Yes, that's
There's
right.
just a lot.
It does-
I
not
know.
right.
So we'll wait for a minute until
Okay.
Scott's here for that, assuming that he's just a minute or two out.
Number 8, didn't we recognize receipt of the minimal energy working group proposal last week?
This is different,
Oh,
yeah,
I don't think I got it.
we will get to that, and I believe
Do you have a packet of this information?
Peter, oh,
This is
sorry, you
old
know
stuff.
what, I forgot, excuse me 1 minute,
Go for
I
it.
have to go get our packets out of the select board.
Okay.
I grabbed mine the other day and I forgot to grab both of yours.
I'm not sure it's your job, but I thought, is it is it more than what was in the, might be? Cause I didn't,
It didn't seem like it was a lot.
I know, well, I read all the stuff that was attached, but I didn't see that particular grant thing, so it must have been coming after.
So people that are sitting there in limbo,
These folks?
yeah,
They don't have to show their faces.
no, they hear.
Well, unless they've turned off their volume.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Sorry, those are
sorry.
the
I'll take it.
regular packets.
Is this the same thing that she sent out the other day, or is this more?
There, I think it's more or less, there may be
Okay.
something that you,
Right, that was in one and not the other, that's fine. This is so hard to read, this way I was really glad I had the one you had sent.
alright, thanks for joining us, Scott.
Sorry, I was late.
That's alright. So you're here to present the tax rate classification hearing.
Yes,
Do you have anything to add other than it's one single tax rate for the whole town?
not a lot, Justin, no, it's one rate, and the reason it's one rate, we just don't have enough in the commercial, industrial, and personal property. Rule of thumb, I think, is you need 80%, 20% in CIP, commercial, industrial, personal property, in order to start for the calculations to come out, we just have to think about it, and we're not even close. We have about 4% in CIP, that's it. So, and the rate hasn't been fully established yet.
So we're not voting on the rate, we're voting on the fact that there's going to be one tax rate for the town. So
Exactly.
I would move that we approve the one tax rate for the whole town, is that the proper motion?
Generally, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Past years.
So just to recap, to make sure I understood.
Yes, of
In
course.
order to have multiple rates,
Yes,
we would have to have at least 20% in commercial, industrial, and what's the P on here?
and that would be personal properties,
Okay,
most of it associated with industrial and commercial.
okay, and we only have about 4%,
Barely
So-
4,
right, so basically,
not even
It's one rate.
close.
Okay.
They do run through the calculations, you know, these forms, you put the numbers in and it gets calculated automatically by the state. Sure, no matter what the numbers are, but yeah, it's gonna be one rate, and we're not even close, yeah. Yeah.
so pretty straightforward, once you've run the numbers.
Yeah, it's very straightforward, yeah.
I second your motion.
Okay, is there any other discussion, comments on the motion? Okay, we'll call a vote on the motion to approve one tax rate for the town.
Aye.
Aye.
And yes, so that's a unanimous yes vote, the motion carries, thanks for joining us, Scott.
You're welcome, again, I apologize for being late.
No,
Well, you were quick, so it all.
Thanks for.
Quick counts.
That was probably the easiest decision you got all year, right?
So we don't have Lori tonight, so she's gonna do.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
recording.
Thanks, Scott.
She's,
Oh, she's on, okay.
See you later, Mickey.
Thanks, Scott.
Mickey, what role are you on? Are you a library trustee?
Pardon?
Are you a library member?
Library trustee, yeah.
That's what I thought. Is that your only position in town?
Yes, it is. And no, I'm not gonna have another one.
Oh, I don't solicit,
You weren't soliciting?
no.
What?
We're not going there.
No, that's.
Alright, so do we wanna try and get through something before the meeting with Chapin Fish?
Sure.
I think so. So the
Alright.
next item is old business one, which is the draft policy anti-discrimination and harassment. And I just have a copy of an email that I got from Sophia today. She said everything looks good and she will add it to her handbook edit. I don't know, Scott, if you've been kept up to date, but Sophia's actually gonna present one handbook all at once for consideration, edits, and approval, instead of section by section.
Right.
And so this will ultimately become part of the handbook. We
So-
had fast tracked it, so that we would have a policy in place more quickly. We had discussed it a couple times at board meetings. I had tried to make an edit that was mutually agreeable, and if the board is on board with this as it's drafted, I would send it to Donna for legal review.
Sure.
And
where's that edit?
mostly in the complaint procedure, so remember how we discussed a lot of times?
This is just this part, right, the same?
Yeah, I didn't give you that whole copy, I just wanted you to see Sophia's.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine, I'm just trying to make sure I have the most current copy, and what she copied here is basically your edited version that you sent out after the last meeting.
Yeah, oh, sorry, here it is, yeah, it hasn't changed. I
Just
sent
'cause
it
it-
to her late on Wednesday, so I actually didn't get back till today because of the
It's fine,
schedule, the weekly schedule.
cause I think I have
I
an
don't know.
e-copy that you sent me.
But
and I
this
just
is the one that I have.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
it
that's
looks like it
Sophia.
lines up with this.
So this is what you had done the editing on and.
So-
She,
Yeah, the general gist of this, the general change was that minor, if it's a minor occurrence, then Sophia and or the department head will just take care of it. And only if it requires action by the select board will Sophia refer the case to the select board.
Yep.
There's a few other changes.
So I think I had a few comments on that, I just have to make sure that. This is the copy that says policy 9/10/22 for
would be helpful
10/12/22.
if these things were dated, so that they know which
Right.
one we're reading.
I'm just trying, because it's like.
So the one that I sent you last week during the meeting
Yep.
is the same one that I printed out for.
Okay, perfect. So I did have a couple of comments in, I think the first substantive one is in 11.
Yeah,
Sorry, there's so many markups, it's hard to follow.
and this was something we had discussed last meeting as well.
Right, I think so, but whether anything got changed. So 11, the way you have it read, the select board shall review the written investigative report and all relevant available documents, but will not necessarily come to the same conclusions the A-Star director or alternate person conducting the investigation. The select board shall review the corrective actions recommended by the HR director or alternate person, but is not required to enact the recommendations, reserves the right to enact corrective actions which the select board finds appropriate. So, I don't, content-wise, I don't know that I have any dispute with that, but I think it's a bit like what I brought up ages ago when we were talking about control of our agenda. We have that right. It's not clear to me that I worry that it sounds like, yeah, you can write whatever report, but we're just gonna redo everything you did anyway. We always have the right to make our own decision, but I worry that if we put that forward too directly, it sounds like we have a plan to undermine anyone else's decision, so why should it? Which
Well,
I think is.
one way that I think it could be reworded would be, include basically the first and third part of each sentence, but leave out the second part. So the select board shall review the written investigative report and all relevant and available documents.
That would be period.
Period.
Right,
And then the select board shall review the corrective actions recommended by the HR director or alternate person and shall,
and reserves the right, just.
well, I wouldn't
put
even
out the
say in
file.
reverse,
Okay.
right, I would say and shall enact corrective actions which the select board finds appropriate.
Yeah, I like that.
Cause there's no, the but is kind of excessive. So this whole paragraph would read, the select board shall review the written investigative report and all relevant and available documents. The select board shall review the corrective actions recommended by the HR director or alternate person and shall enact corrective actions which the select board finds appropriate.
That sounds perfect. What's happening with 12?
12 is
It's fine.
acknowledging that we will invite
The person
a
to be
respondent.
there.
So the respondent has the right to be at any select board meeting at which his or her alleged violations of policy and any corresponding discipline is delivered by the select board. The select board will offer such disciplinary hearings as executive session meetings, but the respondent has the right to have the matter deliberated on in open meeting of the select board. So again, it's something that's how things would probably normally proceed. But I think I wanted to add it to clarify.
That will happen. So. And then 13, the HR will meet with the complainant, notify the complainant.
Just need a couple of signatures on this.
What
I'm
about
sorry
this-
to interrupt you, just need some signatures.
Oh, sure.
That's all, just
Okay.
yours, Shannon's.
Oh, it's Jim.
So do we need Terry here, cause I know Terry.
Yep, and Terry will sign it too, Terry is that way, so I'll find it.
Oh, and I need to do this, I need to log into my gate.
Yeah, Don will help you with that, and help you sign it in if you need help with it.
But I'll just sign.
But for tonight, I just need,
What's the difference with this? Is it just?
There's an online account, which if you don't have access to, you should,
I think that.
which
I
has
do, but I
like our
haven't
tax
used it.
recap.
Right.
and this tax classification. And I think it needs an online,
yeah, it
Signatures
will,
file.
apparently, he said to me, he'll help you with that if you're not familiar with it or whatever you need. But he also needs the ink signatures.
alright, if that's, take care of that.
Do we all have to sign or just?
No, just,
Alright,
thank you again.
So 13, after the investigation is completed, any corrective action is decided upon, the HR director will meet with the complainant, notify the complainant of the findings of the investigation and any corrective action that has been taken.
what about the respondent?
Well, the understanding is that they would have been met with.
But would the
Earlier.
complainant also been met with?
Not in the same way. Okay, so the way that I understand it, in
Oh, we would've-
11 and
okay.
12 is where the select board, if it
Is
makes
the
it to the
respondent,
select
and
board
then,
level.
okay, that's fine, I see your point.
And
I
if
got
it doesn't make it to the select board on number 9, if the recommended corrective actions can be implemented by the department head or other supervisor, the HR director or alternate person conducting the investigation shall notify the select board the same.
Right, so the 11 and 12 are about the respondent essentially, and then, or well, one is our investigation, the next is of the respondent, and this one's the complainant. Okay, that's fair. And then the rest of that's all out. Okay, so the next step is that it goes into the manual and then it goes to Donna when the whole manual is done?
If the
Put those in
board,
by pieces.
if the board agrees, when we're doing the whole handbook, which Sophia's working on,
Mhm.
that will all go to Don, once the
Okay.
board has come to consensus on it. This could also, because we had attempted to fast track this, we could send this with the edits that we've made today to Donna right now, hear back from her likely this week or early next, and approve this as a standalone policy.
In light of the issues we've had, I think, and issues that were raised by the investigation and everything else, it seems to me that getting this piece done would make sense. I mean, I don't have a strong feeling, but I do suggest it, and we've done it. Incorporating it into the final thing, Donna wouldn't have to read that section a second time, so.
Yes, yeah,
Does it put more work on her, well, more cost to the town to do it piece by piece?
Um,
I agree with you that maybe this particular one of its importance should be fast tracked through her. At least we know that it's watertight.
yeah, I would imagine if we do it piece by piece, that would add some time to our bill. So that would be the question, how much time? In theory, it really shouldn't add much, cause she's reviewing the same amount, but I'm sure it will, cause she's starting out. And, so, do we want to send this to Donna as we've edited it and come up with it? And we'll just do this one, and then the rest of the handbook will be all at once?
If it's a policy that we have, doesn't that stand alone on the fact that it's a policy that we all agree upon until it's vetted?
I'm not sure I follow you.
I mean, without asking Donna to make certain that it's legal, whatever legalese.
I would say so, except that the legal ramifications of this particular policy are significant.
But then to Donna, I think we should just go to her right away then.
Yeah,
Just
that's kind of how I
let's
feel
get her to
too.
read it. So I mean, it's not much.
No,
Alright, if there's general consensus, then I will send this to Donna as we edited it tonight, and hopefully hear back, and we can approve this as standalone
Mhm.
policy, and it will ultimately become part of the whole handbook.
Yeah.
I agree to that consensus.
me too, and thanks for your work on this, because it was a lot of work and
Yeah,
you
it was.
showed a lot of patience in the revisions and it's all appreciated.
We got something we all agree on, which is good.
Yeah,
Chapin, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Do you wanna sit somewhere or stand, whatever works for you?
Whatever you'd like.
You're welcome to this special gray seat or a red seat.
Hi, I'm Chapin.
I'm Susan
Nice to meet
Cooper, that's,
I'm Scott Johnson.
Yeah.
So, we don't have anything, official, I guess, to do today in terms of permitting.
No.
But we discussed, going over potential permits you may apply for in the future that may come to the board, and just a general update on the store, the general store, how it's going, and we can, have a timeline for permitting or other official things that come to the town.
we get asked what's going on with the store.
you. So do I.
So, yeah, so it would be great to have something to be able to tell people.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. I don't know if you, back when we bought it, read what we wrote, we had a mission statement, I don't like that. Right, some things, but, we wrote, what we wrote is what we meant, that's still our goal. A little, obviously COVID got in the way, both in terms of, getting electricians, plumbers, et cetera, to show up. The cost of building materials, as you probably know, has skyrocketed. And during COVID, it wasn't a time we wanted to.
Sorry, one second, Chief. There's some feedback from a caller on the phone. If you could please mute yourself. Thank you. Sorry, Chief.
No problem. So, we have never stopped moving forward. Obviously, we make, the money that we live on and is paying for the store with Brockman Real Estate. And, that was insane the first 2 years, so we didn't have a lot of time to work on it then, but we've never stopped working on it. It's been continuous. But getting the people that we needed to, the contractors, et cetera, that we needed to show up, that was definitely a challenge. Hopefully, we're very close to getting our framing sign off, our electrical sign off. We already have 90% of our plumbing sign off for all the rough work. So hopefully we really like to open next spring, probably later spring. It's more realistic than early spring. Um, and we're excited about it still. I don't know how, I did speak at the community center, probably a year or two ago. And I don't think a lot of people didn't understand what really horrifically bad shape the building was in. Water coursing through the basement, flooding down there, mold, like a lot of mold down there. I mean, it was not sustainable. I could get into detail or not, depends how much you want, but the entire ridge vent leaked. It was a building that, as you probably know even better than I, but for many decades, people that owned the building didn't run the business. And sometimes in some iterations of that business, I think that they had financial challenges, whether due to the economy or whatever it was. So, putting money into the building had not been a priority for many decades. The last major renovation, as best I can tell, was in the early 90s. Again, not an owner operator that was doing that work. And, the 90s wasn't the pinnacle of American design. You have a building that's from 1880, 1890, beautiful chestnut beams that people are going to be able to see now. And they were covered up with like red oak posts, which was very popular in the 90s, but not really authentic. The building is going to be, it is definitely different inside, which I think is a good thing. It's going to be handicapped accessible except for the second floor. We are going to, since I mentioned that, we are going to ask for the support of the community, because we will need essentially a variance from the Architectural Review Board, which is, if you're not familiar with that, that's basically the equivalent of like the ADA Review Board for Massachusetts, because there's no way to make the second floor handicap accessible. Just can't put an elevator in or anything like that. We certainly don't have the money. We can make an accommodation for that on the main floor, and that's what we're going to do. If you remember, none of the one bathroom that was there was certainly not handicap accessible. We're going to have 2 handicap accessible bathrooms. They're not going to be overlooking the river like last time, but they're going to be much more accessible. It's going to have a real handicap accessible ramp, which it was not the case before either. So that's one of the things that we're going to be asking for the support from the community when we get that variance. And the other thing that we're going to ask for the support of the community, and will also fault to you as the LLA or local licensing authority, is getting a pouring license. And typically in Massachusetts, we fill out the application, that goes before you, or if you designate someone else as the LLA, but typically you. And then that gets published and have a public hearing, and we go from there. So that's the goal in terms of it also being a fine. Now, it's very important to us that it is a welcoming place for Monterey, and all the surrounding communities. We want to make it as affordable as we can. It also needs to be a financially viable business on its own, and we think it will. There's not a lot of, I know I'm skipping around a little, but there's not a lot of steps like there used to be inside. The eating area is no longer raised up, but there were these massive, this is an example of like, the work what we're doing and why it's also taking some time. So underneath where the eating area was raised up, by the way, in when they did the work in the 90s, they put a whole new floor in rather than leveling the floors, right? So there's actually two floors there now. In that area that was raised up, we removed one of the floors, and underneath was the original hand plane chestnut floors that were in terrible shape, but with the big trap doors that opened up. Because if you look at the old pictures, the horse and carriage used to go down underneath that raised area. You'd open up those doors, and if you were on the second floor ever, or if you go in there now because that ceiling is gone, that's all cathedraled up in there, there's another hatch. So there used to be pulleys, and they could bring whatever was in the horse and carriage to whatever floor they wanted to store it on. Well, there was beautiful, completely covered with mold, but beautiful 8-inch by 16-inch chestnut beams that were in the basement. So those are now overhead where the second floor used to be in the eating area, the cafe area, we'll call it. It's that sort of level of detail. You know, we were fortunate enough to have a local resident help us, and he sold us a number of antique posts and beams that we used. We did have a structural engineer go over everything, of course. And some of those beams, I believe, were from the barn that was part of Brookbend as well. So it's all coming together really nicely. It's going to be a beautiful space where we want it to be affordable and welcoming. And hopefully we're going to be able to procure the materials that we need to finish at prices we can afford, because we're doing all of this without taking on any debt at all. Wow. Yeah, but we think that's important because we don't want to go into the business with debt. I'm sure you also get asked, well, what are we going to be doing?
I was just gonna ask him. Thank you
So
for being to it.
it's going to be a cafe. Breakfast you can eat there, or to go. Lunch, same thing. We'd like to do some dinners, certainly not every night. We could have a burger night. We'd like to have it be available, like if somebody wants to have a small event there, like a rehearsal dinner or something like that, we can provide the chef, or they can bring it in. We're putting in a full commercial kitchen, which for many, many, many years, that was not the case there. So there's never been a hood of any sort in that space, even though, they had bacon cooking, right? But that was in a propane oven that just went into the outside. That's not how we're doing it. We're trying to do it all the right way. Mr. Trico's been great, very helpful. We have Zach Culbreth is the architect who came up with the initial design, and he and I collaborated to sort of work on that, and then the interior is something that I'm doing with some other people too. So we'll also have food to go, prepared food. If you want to buy spaghetti and toilet paper, that's not going to be the place, because you just can't make money. Everybody who needs it is just going to drive into town, or they're going to drive up to Lee. But we'll have essentials, we'll have the newspaper, we'll have great coffee, and we'll have a modern version of a general store, a less touristy version. If anybody ever went to our store that was in Great Barrington, it's called Farm at Home. So there's going to be a section for that, and I think it's going to be. I'm looking forward to having the coffee group come, and lots of kids running around like our own, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I don't want to just talk forever. So
What will be on the second floor?
real estate.
Okay,
That's our real estate business.
okay.
Any other questions you can think of?
Thanks for the update.
Yeah.
From me.
Really helpful.
We will look forward to receiving your application for a pouring license.
And now I know some people are newer to the select board. I don't know if you know, but we already got all the permits. The work is done on, for example, the septic. One problem with the with the building before was there were like 18 seats, which is not a viable business. Well, we spent a good amount of money and we got permission and we put in a new septic field, a leach field. So that increases our seating to about 40 something. Yeah, inside. Yeah. But yeah, any questions or you have, or, we're gonna start doing regular updates in the Monterey News. We're also gonna be promoting just our Instagram site and our website, just so people sort of have an idea of what's happening. During COVID, we didn't have a lot to share, unfortunately, but yeah, and hopefully people like the color. But that's the level of detail, that color, like, which is a historically correct color, that was something that took about 2 years to get right.
My goodness, I'm excited to see what it looks like.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome inside.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for joining us,
Okay,
Chapin.
Thank you very much, really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, anytime. Take care.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
So before continuing on with old business, I think it would make sense to move to new business 8, which is a grant proposal from the Renewable Energy Working Group, because I see
Yep.
Peter here. What we have received is a request for up to $750 to hire a grant writer for the Municipal Energy Technical Assistance Grant. And the town could be awarded up to $15,000 for site assessment for rooftop solar at the firehouse and pavilion. And we also have received a CV of the woman who
Who would
is,
do the grant, right?
who would do the grant
Yeah,
writing.
yeah.
So we do start the year with $10,000 in the grant writing account each year, so I think,
That's to pay for the writer who spends the time writing the grant.
yes.
And it's a pretty substantial grant, so.
Yeah, Peter, as the chair of the Renewable Energy Working Group, I think spearheaded this application and figuring out how to get this grant done with the appropriate professional assistance.
Actually, Dennis Lynch was on the case back in May and June, and then there was a long delay for the DOER to publish the specifications. And then Dennis, for his own reasons, was not available to write the grant, but through one of our members, we were put in touch with Judy Eddy, whose CV you have. We had one meeting with her. She sounds completely experienced and competent, and we're happy to have her. And it seems to me her estimate of time is quite reasonable.
Yes.
Is the only location those two areas, the fire pavilion and the pavilion? That's,
Define only.
well,
I
that,
think that this is to look at those, right, those are the locations this would look at.
What we're choosing to focus on in our application is community shared solar, development of a community shared solar system on private or public property, site assessment, outlining the business and ownership model, assessment of community interests, letters of commitment from at least 5 CSS participants, feasibility study for roof-mounted systems. And from the beginning of our efforts to develop solar electricity for the town, we have felt that rooftop solar on existing town buildings is the least controversial and most feasible project. So that's why because this grant has that specific provision, the monies that the DOER is awarding to the grant recipients is for this particular thing, and that's always been our first objective.
Okay.
It's also true that there is a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act passed by Congress last summer that changes the financing structure for municipal solar installations. Prior to the IRA, it was true that municipal solar was generally done with a third party. That is to say, if we wanted to put solar on the roof of this building, the town would get an agreement with a third-party electricity developer who would, own the hardware, install the hardware, own the juice, sell the juice. The town would lease the roof to the developer. And the reason for that is that all the tax advantages accrue to a profit-making business. And the municipality can't take any advantage of the tax. And that has changed with the IRA. Now a municipality can be awarded a grant in the amount of 30% of the cost of a solar project. So it's a different landscape within the last few months. In terms of financing. So we have a lot to learn about how this might work. But I think we have a better chance of getting a fast track toward good information and estimates and proposals from installers. And I'm hopeful that we'll have some panels on the roof in a reasonable amount of time. And as you know, we're also engaged with the UMass Clean Energy Extension. We have students, two students in that energy extension program who are Monterey's students. They're going to assess solar panel possibilities throughout the town, private and public. They will do a survey of residents and ratepayers as to what they want in terms of renewable energy. And by May of 2023, they will have an action plan for the town. So those are the two fronts that are kind of coming together lately. I'm hopeful that we'll get this grant. The deadline is soon, November 18th, but I think we can meet it with Judy's help. And we'll be doing a lot of the work in writing the grant proposal ourselves.
Do you know
That's where we're at.
structural engineering that goes on to double check roof load capacities?
Yep.
So all of that's taken into consideration prior to the grant being even written?
Well, the grant is for the assessment.
Okay, so that helps cover that assessment of the existing structure's capacity to hold the.
Yes.
It would seem that the pavilion never had that concept in its original design, maybe nor did the fire department.
Right.
So there may be modifications to those roofs in order that need to be made prior to the erection of the units.
Yep.
But that's all covered in that request for the grant.
That's a necessary part of putting solar panels on roofs.
Yeah.
You gotta know what the load is and whether the roof can support it.
Mhm.
On that topic, I assume they'll consider the life expectancy of the roof and it.
Presumably the panels too.
And the panels too, that's
Right.
correct. I think, everybody's getting in on the game now. Solar is hot.
Again,
And
it cooled off for a while.
it cooled off for a while. And
There's nothing
I
like a
think that-
spike in energy costs to have everybody running for the solar panels.
anybody who has a current solar panel, It wouldn't surprise me if they're obsolete in 20 years,
Maybe less.
maybe less.
That was approximately what they gave me for the lifespan of my roof, 20 years.
Okay.
And
Roof or
then
roof panels?
panels.
Panels.
I had just built the roof and shingled it,
Right,
so I knew that the shingles underneath, all of a sudden, they gain more life.
right.
The ones that are on the
Protected.
perimeter may not, but the panels themselves have a lifespan.
Yeah.
Technology changes, the panel changes.
Right.
So, cool, that'd be great to see that happen.
Thank you for the update, Peter. I would move that the board approve the grant request form for up to $750 to hire a grant writer.
Second,
I'm all about it. Is 750 the request from Judy?
Yes.
And that's gonna cover it?
10 hours is what they're saying.
Wow.
If that was her estimate. Her rate is $75,
Mhm.
her estimate was 10 hours. You know, that depends somewhat on how much of the legwork the working group does.
Mhm.
Judy's full-time employed, so she'll be working nights and weekends, but there's a lot that we can do to help her. You know, we will solicit the 5, buy-ins, just letters of support from people. On Monday, the 7th, there's an opportunity to talk to the DOR about the details of our proposal and get some feedback. They ask for community support, and that's a very big tent. Well, I don't know what they mean by community support, but we will go to them and say, this is what we have. Does that qualify as community support?
Peter, tell us, after that, let us know if you need anything from us as soon as possible, so we can make sure we have something for you. If you need it for the submission, whether it's something from us as the town,
Yeah.
or, I don't know, this'll sound crazy, but I don't think the Monterey News has quite been put to bed yet. And if it hasn't, you might wanna ask if he can put something in there, if you support solar in this site, can you send us a letter? I'm just throwing that crazy idea out there, I don't know what they want, but it's only 2.5 weeks away, the 18th, right, maybe 3 weeks on the outside there. I just wanna make sure we can get a huge showing of support for you, so that if you get the grant, we can be like, yes, Monterey wants this.
We will let you know as soon as we know. I
Okay.
think that the simple fact that the select board established the working group indicates, official support for the effort.
Okay.
So I'll call a vote on the motion to approve this request form.
I approve.
Yes,
3 yeses, unanimous, motion carries. Thank you again, Peter, for joining us.
and thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Let's see if we can get some signatures on here.
Nice. No problem. Alright. That's the old version.
All right, so
Alright.
we had jumped ahead because Peter was present with us. We will move back to 2 old business, getting rid of remote meeting format for select board meetings. Which we have been tabling for a couple weeks, but Scott is with us now, and I believe Scott wanted to add this to the agenda.
Yeah, I always felt that Monterey is small. 7 miles, I think, is the maximum travel distance if you're a resident to come to a town meeting. Everybody always screamed and hollered, you gotta have night meetings so we can come to them. We had night meetings, nobody showed up. At noon meetings, nobody showed up. So the only way people seem to do this is to sit in an audience and then raise their hand and become somewhat, sometimes irate, obscene, foul-mouthed, accusational, everything but what you'd expect from a citizenry. So to me, having this sit here as like big brother, it's an irritant to me. Now, I'm only here maybe until May. So people may want it, people may not want it. But I would move that we disabandon it and stop this little big brother spy. People want to come to this meeting, come to the meeting. This is where we are. This is why we're here tonight. Otherwise, we could all just sit in our own homes and sit in front of a movie camera and say what we want to say. So that's my motion, is that I would move to disband it. And if you want to later on, as a board down the road, bring it back, have at it. You may not want to follow my motion. That's fine too. But I just wanted it to go out there and be part of one of the things that I dislike about sitting back at this desk, because of the way things have taken the shape and form that they've made. So my motion is to get rid of this starting next week.
Okay. So I think I can see.
I can honestly
Yeah.
say I don't see this floating,
That's
but it's out there.
There's no problem with introducing it.
That's right.
I can see your point of view, because we have, since I've been on the board for a year and a half, have had on occasion, unpleasant things said at meetings that weren't just unpleasant and necessary to say for the meeting, but were unpleasant and not productive for the meeting.
Mhm.
I think they've happened both in person and on the Zoom, but there certainly is a tendency for things to get out of control with people tuning in from the computer. On the other hand, there's no reason that the chair can't moderate the people online, just like the chair can moderate the people in the room. And dismiss or quiet people who are out of order. And I think that it's very valuable. I think that the benefits outweigh the unfortunate consequences. With the benefits that I see being, we often meet with people, and a lot of the people that we're dealing with now, even, our accountant, our treasurer, they don't live in town, and many others, and they're not even near the area. So when we call them into a remote meeting, they can join easily, as well as other organizations that we work with or other people. And I agree that, if people live in town, it's not gonna be a far distance for them to travel to town hall. But some people can't drive, or it may be bad weather, or they, don't want to expose themselves to disease in the room. So I think
If we got Scott.
I can see why it sometimes is unpleasant, but I think that having it available to meet with people, to allow people to participate who may not be able to drive down to town hall, come down to town hall, even though it seems like most people probably could. I think for those reasons, it's valuable, and I would prefer to keep it the way it is.
I mean, I can say that it enabled me to attend a bunch of meetings when I literally couldn't drive, right? And I do wonder, and I don't know whether this requires a policy or, if somebody was in the room, they don't come into the room with a balaclava on to hide their identity. I'm wondering if we could ask that if people are going to join the Zoom, they actually put their full name up there. And if they, cause it does, most of the people that speak usually do put their camera on for that. But it's a little bit more honest, that if you're gonna come to a meeting, you should be willing to say who you are.
Yeah.
And not speak anonymously. It's a public meeting, they could read the minutes. If they're putting it online, they could watch the video, and I find the video useful, I think it's a good thing. Even when it's me misbehaving on the video, I'm okay with that, that's what I said, and it's a record of what I said, and I can't be misrepresented by it. But I definitely witnessed enough people misbehaving in person. I totally see your point about it's easier, right, to say things when you're physically not there.
I think, and to go to your point about anonymous contributions, this is another thing that could be solved by the chair keeping the meeting under better control, which is that when people come and sit in the audience, we don't require them to wear a name tag, but when they go to speak, they are supposed to introduce themselves. And there's no reason, I mean, that really is kind of the same requirement. I think on occasions, I've gotten relaxed about having people identify themselves, because oftentimes we know the people who are contributing, but the chair can definitely make an effort. You know, if you're going to speak, you have to introduce yourself. And certainly, it would be out of order for someone to speak without introducing themselves, and we could call them on it. That's simply something that the chair can do better.
Would those kinds of things make you feel better about it?
Not really. I mean, I understand the pros and the cons.
Right.
I'm just a small town guy, and I can't stand the fact that there's so many lazy people willing to hide behind their microphone. I would definitely say that nobody gets the chance to speak if they don't have the courage to say who they are. You know, it's just like an anonymous letter, right in the round file. We never read them. It was just hearsay, basically. So if you don't have the courage to stand up and say who you are, or to come down here and to get things off your chest, then don't get online. And, you know, that's my opinion. So I would ask you to call the vote.
Yeah, we can call,
And
but
let's just move to the next thing, because
Yeah.
it's already 8 minutes more than we probably spend on things like this.
Understood.
alright, I see, Ellen, do you have a quick
I
comment?
just wanna point out that, Scott, for some people like us, who are permanent residents, but can't really deal with our house on Beartown Road from December to March, or November, mid-November to March, because of the problems with no connectivity for 911, et cetera, and roads in winter. We're in another house for those 4 months, 5 months, and we would have we'd have to drive 2 hours to get back here to come to a meeting. Both of us are very interested in being involved. We wouldn't be able to. I don't know how many other people in town are in our boat, maybe not many, but it would be truly upsetting to me if we didn't have that access. I can understand also what Justin is saying about the other people who don't even live in town, as well as the recordings. But my most important objection would be that we'd be unable to attend. It's not a question of driving 7 miles, it's 100 miles for us for those 4 or 5 months. That's all I want to say.
Okay, Mickey, do you have something quick,
Yeah,
because I think we are in a call.
Quickly, I agree with Scott. The past couple of weeks, there's been nobody here, but Ellen and I. I'm not gonna be here all the time, but there is the thought, there are a lot of, the older people have troubles driving at night, and even if it's just a couple of miles, it's an uncomfortable couple of miles. And I know I've sat here, you know, some winter nights, and you go like, am I gonna be able to get home? Am I gonna be able to get up my hill, you know, when I get there? And it was fine when I worked, and yeah, I had to do it, and then I had to walk up the hill many times. But it can be a little nerve-wracking at times, but I would rather see some more people actually come in here. So some of you that are online, and you could really make the effort and get in here and join in. I think that would be, that's all.
Alright, we are gonna call a vote on Scott's motion. Scott, the motion to abandon,
I vote yes.
remote participation. Scott votes yes.
Did we even have a second?
We didn't have a second. Board rules
Well,
don't
that's true.
require, the board rules don't require a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I always thought that a motion would fail on the fact that it wouldn't carry.
It can if someone points out that there was no second, but I called the vote nonetheless.
Alright, I'm gonna vote no.
Susan votes no, Justin votes no, the motion.
Did I not know this was gonna happen?
No, you did, but you just wanted to air it, I don't.
That's fine, great.
Alright,
If you don't
I
air
just want
things
people-
out, you
It
know
would
what
be great if
happens?
people could
They eat you up.
behave better, that would be what would
Well,
be good.
we're gonna make them behave better.
Yeah, okay,
well, and you identified a couple things that the chair can do. Everyone in person and online needs to recognize themselves before they speak, and they'll be ruled out of order if they don't.
Sure, okay. Next order of business.
Yes, the next order of business is the request from the building department to raise inspection fees and payments to inspectors
from 60 to 75.
from 60 to 75. The only hang up that I see with this is the amount going to the inspector is going up and the amount going to the town is going down by $1. I think that we should approve this, but make it a $75 fee with $69 going to the inspector and $6 going to the town, so that the town maintains the same amount per permit, because we are not doing any less work. There's nothing less that the town is doing.
I'm straight with that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea,
So
I noticed it as well, and I think that's a good
Mhm.
solution.
I would move that the board approve an increase in the plumbing, gas, and electrical inspector fees to $75 per inspection, with $69 going to the inspector and $6 going to the town.
I second that.
There's a second. Is there any other discussion or any public comment on this? On these fees? Alright, there being none, we'll call a vote. Susan?
Yes,
Scott?
Yes.
Justin, yes, the motion carries. We have new fees. The next item on the agenda is the Board of Registrars vacancy, which we discussed last week. It's come to our attention that if you are elected, if you're on the Board of Registrars and you take on an elected position or started with an elected position, you automatically vacate your seat. I ran this by town council. We are exempt, you can be an appointed member of the Board of Registrars.
And this is Donna's rebuttal.
No, Donna agrees that we currently have 4 registrars, 3 or 4, and 2 of them that we all agree are on the Board of Registrars are in elected town positions.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
We're specials.
no, they're not registrars.
they can't be.
They can't legally be
Yeah.
registrars.
The only appointed people could be accepted even in a town of under 2,000. So we basically
I
short two
read that the
registrars.
other way, but perhaps I didn't.
Yeah, we've been over it and over it, it's clearly, yeah, and Donna agrees.
Yeah.
So basically, the 2 people who are in elected office can't serve as registrars. So and we're actually technically not registrars from the moment they were elected, so we have to appoint 2 ones.
Do we have said pool?
So this is the next thing, is a letter that I was tasked to send to the caucus chairs, and I would have just sent it, but I wanted to run it by the board first, and I was just drafting it this afternoon, and I figured I might as well.
So this is to you.
So the process is we ask each caucus, the Republican caucus and the Democratic caucus, to provide us with a list of names, and then if they don't, we ask the state parties, and if they don't, we just appoint registrars, but this seems to me to be the process that we need to go through. We do need to figure out who we have the town clerk is automatically on the board of registrars, so we have 1, we're supposed to have 4. We have 2 that we know hold elected positions with the library board of trustees and the board of assessors, actually Scott was in here earlier today. And then, so they're automatically off as far as we can tell. I'm not sure if Steve Cullen is on the board of registrars or not. We may need to do a little bit
I
of digging.
didn't think that was the person, I didn't think he was on the list that I saw. so-
But either way, we do need to discern, and then we would either need to appoint 2, we definitely need to appoint 2, so we need to appoint 2 or 3 people.
And ideally, at least one of them would be a Republican, if we can find one
Yeah,
that's willing to serve.
we're supposed to try to balance the party membership. And it says where there's really not supposed to be more than 2 registrars from one party.
But I think there is an exemption if you can't.
Yeah,
find
if we
any other
absolutely
way,
can't,
yeah.
but.
But we need to at least ask.
Yeah, so the plan was to ask the chair of each caucus for a list of eligible people. And then go from there.
I think, are they supposed to supply at least 3 people?
I thought I read that somewhere and then I couldn't
Find it
find
again?
it, and so
thought
I
read
just
that too.
asked for
A slate,
a
right.
slate of
Okay.
people, and I don't know what kind of response. I hope that we can get something, but I know the town caucuses have not been particularly active lately, so I don't know if we will get a response.
Do you know what the process is, should we not get a response from them?
Yes, we go to the state parties,
Okay.
and then if we don't hear back in 45 days, we just go ahead and start appointing people.
Okay.
Regardless of their position in the town.
No, it should still be
Not
people who are
elected.
not elected. We are exempt, so we can appoint people who are appointed. But we should still try and balance party membership as far as I can tell.
I mean, I suppose we could send out a mailing to anyone registered Republican in the town directly and be like, would you like to serve?
Well, at this point, we need both parties.
Right, I know, but I think it's a lot easier to find one than the other, yeah.
Well, for right now, we'll,
Yeah.
Let's go with
this
this.
is the process.
Yep.
And then,
And then.
This looks fine to me.
okay,
Yeah, it'll be fine.
alright.
Thanks
That
for
takes
doing
care of
that.
the board of registrars vacancies, it has a plural vacancies. The next item, we'll move on to new business, is town administrator items, so draft memo regarding the town administrator. So this is something that Susan and I discussed last week, Scott.
Yeah, I've been following that.
And my point of view, just to recap, was that I think that the select board should reconsider the town administrator's role as direct supervisor to each department head. Obviously, if the board did come to some kind of agreement that that was worth review or reconsideration, there would be a process to go through. But if we're gonna take a vote and it's not gonna go that way, then this memo will be signed off on, and that's that. But the fact of the matter is, we, for other reasons, are reviewing the job description and contract, which I've sent to Donna, because we discussed, when we wanna make those changes to the job description. We will be going through that process to some degree anyway, but that would have to be part of that process of reviewing and negotiating the job description and contract. But I do not want to sign off on this memo because I think that the select board should reconsider this position and that the town administrator should not be the direct supervisor of these department heads.
So I don't know if I expressed this eloquently last week, but just to recap, I feel like ideally, we would at some point like to go back to meeting, I think, every other week if we can get things stabilized. That was what happened for years and it would be a good goal. I feel like, it's not really an option anymore for towns to try to manage employees. If by the select board, which is meeting every couple of weeks, even every week, right? Those kinds of things need to be dealt with more expeditiously. That was why the decision was made to get a town administrator. That, every town administrator job description I've seen has those supervisory responsibilities in it. And we have a contract, so I see your point, but I feel pretty certain that if we were to try to go that route, her contract says that she would have to agree to that change, and if I were her, I wouldn't, right? If I was hired to do that job, I would want to do that job. I think that if we really don't want a town administrator, because taking away supervisory authority basically undermines the purpose of having the administrator, because the purpose is for day-to-day management. So then you need to trust that to them. And I think at that point, we would have two options, either when the contract is up, we choose no longer to have a town administrator, or if we're not happy with the town administrator's performance, we choose to get a different town administrator. But I don't think the midstream, adjustment of that magnitude makes a lot of sense to me. Particularly because I don't think we are in a position to do the day-to-day management of staff.
Yeah, can I respond to that?
Sure.
And I see your hand, again, I think Scott may have something to add as well, but I am not, proposing to get rid of the town administrator role. And I think, there is a long list of what the town administrator does, and I think should absolutely continue to do, whether it's coordinating grants, coordinating between departments to make sure, resources are shared. And, it's a long list. What's the job description? It's like 15 or 20 items of duties and responsibilities. I'm only specifically talking about direct supervision, and that's what this memo is about.
Mhm.
And so it's not to say, and as I said last week, Melissa as the town administrator is incredibly valuable with resources to know who to speak to in town, what the laws are, who to speak to at the state level, at the Commonwealth level, or at the county level with PRPC. And it's not to say that that's where people wouldn't turn to the town administrator for those day-to-day questions. It's more about, it's more about the direct supervision and managing the general direction of departments and guiding departments on how to move forward on goals. I mean, no one, in theory, we hire department heads, and we do, because not in theory, we do, that run departments well and don't need close oversight. It's more about, general guidance and overarching goals, and when something goes very wrong, what do we do to fix that? And I see that as the role of this, possibly what could be the role of the select board going forward, not the day-to-day, I need to talk to the accountant, or I want to apply for a grant, what resources do I use? I think that that's absolutely something that Melissa should do as a town administrator. And that's not what I'm trying to get at, not the day-to-day questions of the legal and technical questions, but the, the direct supervision and, at the end of the day, the management of the departments. But, and Scott has experience on a board that functioned that way, at least in theory, if not in practice. I'm not familiar with how you viewed your
Supervisory role.
previous time on the board and how that went. And maybe you think that because of that, I don't know which way you feel about having a town administrator who is the direct, not about having a town administrator, because I'm not disagreeing with all of the functions of a town administrator.
To have
Just
the
one.
town administrator be the ultimate supervisor of everybody.
Yes, of the department. I mean, that's specifically what this memo is about.
Right. So let me just ask to hear Ms. Jervis's input.
Yeah, Mickey,
I was
please
going,
introduce yourself.
oh, Mickey Jervis.
Stranger.
I won't try to put my other name in there because you won't know who I am then. That could be my honest name. Anyway, I wasn't thinking so much about the director of operations, who I think he is running a good department. I don't know how much day-to-day stuff he actually needs even. But I was worried about the town clerk. The town clerk is responsible for
The picture and sound have frozen. Yeah, you guys are frozen.
Still frozen.
They signed off, Don. I think they have to sign back on.
Oh, do they know that?
Yeah, at the top of my screen, it says that they're experiencing technical difficulties, and unless they rejoin, the session will end.
We have to be careful with that. So my feeling, the way the supervisory role for Melissa right now is that it opens up cans of worms. People in town are gonna say, okay, well, if she's not the supervisor, how much did that cost? Because now we wanna take that away from the money. My feeling is, let's let this thing ride. Let's try to get a better handle on what is vision versus management, and try to find that fine line and make certain that it doesn't get crossed. Because otherwise, we're gonna all of a sudden find ourselves in a position where our TA is not happy with her position. People are unsure of who's in any position
Right.
anymore. I don't care if I was here for the next 20 years. I don't want that position. I don't think any one of us are really in that position because we've tried it before on the boards that I were on. We each took a department, and then we found out that we couldn't say anything to anybody else because of it. So it just didn't work. So one person answers to us. The human resource director answers, I believe, to us. The human resource director and are kind of like on equal footings. They each discuss things with different groups, and they discuss things within themselves, and they come to us with issues. And I really believe that we need to be the ones that set the parameters for the difference, to differentiate between micromanagement and supervision, and make certain that things don't get crossed over.
Yeah, so that, if you had that clearly defined,
Well,
and that nobody is gonna get.
you can never say nobody will ever get, because it's
No,
human
yeah.
nature. But I think
You
that
have to be.
it's a work in
careful.
progress.
Yeah.
And this
Because that's
town
what
is a
happened
work in
before,
progress.
though. It's very young,
I mean,
this town.
It just makes me think that in order to get this all to work, we all have to wanna make it work. And we all have to understand each other's limits, and what we can ask of others and what we shouldn't ask of others. And once we understand that, it should smooth out. I hope it smooths out.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
And if it doesn't, then when the time is right, if, like, Justin, if you said that we're gonna start going through the new job description, et cetera, well, that's the time that we introduce a different role for the TA. But who's gonna take that supervision?
I mean, and maybe define, go ahead, go.
Melissa,
I just
you're,
want to say we didn't hear anything Mickey said, and your camera's off now because you went
Okay,
offline for like 5 minutes.
I think, perfect.
Oh dear.
I think that
We
we,
fluffed today.
turn on camera.
I don't know why it
There
went
was-
off. We didn't do anything.
In the intervening time period, our apologies for technical difficulties. There were no votes taken or official decisions that were made. There was just conversation between Mickey Jervis and Scott Jensen. How would we sum up the conversation?
And we both kind of agreed that there's a differentiation between supervision and micromanagement, and that we have to find that line, because there may be certain things that you can't ask of department heads due to privacy or security that have become, ever present in our lives. And that we need to figure out what those are and how we can implement them so that we don't cross those lines and somebody doesn't feel like they're being asked to give information that they're not supposed to give, or feels that it's not the purview of the person who's asking to receive it. That's at least what I think.
Yeah, I was gonna throw something out to see how you felt about it, because I have a thought that's a little different than the box we use. That has comment.
Ellen did have her hand raised.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
So when policies change, we've already changed a bunch of policies, right, or modified them. When policy changes, that's definitely us. Would you concur?
Yes.
I mean, I think that's definitely our role. Then there's procedure, which is a slightly different thing. I mean, supervision consists of lots of different things.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's a subset of the supervisory role that we may be more concerned about, and not the whole thing, but some parts of it. But I'm wondering, like, if a major change in procedure was gonna happen, or I'll even call it significant, because major might be above that. And that had to be vetted with us before it was rolled out, and maybe, clearly explained, and there was a plan for how it would roll out, and what that would rollout would look like, and some of the problems were anticipated, and that came before us before it was rolled out. Would that help? Would you feel better about our role, our supervisory role of the TA, and therefore the downstream effect of it? I mean, I don't know, it's just a thought I had while I'm sitting here, so.
So yeah, I think, and I recounted, and Melissa recounted a conversation that we had, not this past Monday, but the one before that. And I think, Melissa and I talked about what this memo would mean and how it would look going forward. And my general sense was just that, I think exactly that, like that major changes should come to the board. I think there's some value in that. Most of the major changes that the town administrator has proposed to the board, we have gone through with, and if we haven't gone through them, we've at the very least considered them and often done something, whether it's taking care of the use of this room that we're in right now, or whether it's the monthly meetings. That those two come to mind right away. And the point being just that those things come to the select board level. And I think that there's some value in that, and I wouldn't want to change that through a different interpretation of the job description. I just think that there's kind of an unclear point of where does something come to the board and where does it not? And I just want to make sure that things that should come to the board do, and that we don't delegate away supervision. It's not the day-to-day minor supervision, but how generally is supervision taken care of, and what happens when there's a disagreement or something goes wrong, and at what level is that settled. And I think there's some value. We've had, a lot of discussion about town administrator versus select board. Towns all over are transitioning to town administrator or town manager models for obvious reasons, because it's helpful to have a professional, to have someone who stays. Boards may change, but the town administrator stays, is trained, is knowledgeable, is full-time, whereas board members often, are new to the job, don't have that training, are not a full-time professional dedicated to it. And if some way we could take those benefits, and I have the job description pulled up in front of me, which goes A through S, so that's probably about 20 essential functions of the role. And the only essential function that I'm really speaking to is, what does this supervision and responsible for the efficient administration of all departments, committees, boards, and officers look like? What is done day to day, because boards set policy. They're not in day to day, and when they do, like you said, meet with department heads, they can't make any real decisions, and they can't communicate it to other board members. We've had this discussion about meeting once a week or once every 2 weeks. I wouldn't envision the type of supervision that I'm talking about being the kind that needs to be done once a week. We've been meeting once a week for other reasons, right? It would be the kind of things that can happen once every 2 weeks when there's, disagreements at a lower level. And just making sure that those things come to the board, because the board, at the end of the day, is the elected representatives of the people, and we delegate away a lot of our responsibilities to the Concom, to the Board of Health, to the town administrator who supervises all of those appointed people. We delegate away a lot that could be, and just what level of authority and supervision are we delegating away, and what continues to come to the board and be decided by the board?
And I think what becomes really hard is how, I mean, the word supervision could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I absolutely grant you that. And I have no idea how you draft something that makes clear universally what exact parts of supervision are okay or who does what. I think it's tricky. I mean, I would not know how to go about doing that. I totally see your point, and I think there is a legitimate role for the select board in when there's significant changes in a procedure, for sure, right? I agree with you. I like to hear about it. I wanna know what's gonna happen, and I want to see the plan for it, and why they think it'll work, and how they think it'll improve everything. I completely agree with you. And I'm not trying to, slough off any responsibility. I just wanna make sure it will work, but I have no idea how you could draft that, fine tune that, other than to say that the board reserves authority, ultimate authority over changes in policies and procedures.
Without saying, that's already,
I mean, I think it's already
already-
true, exactly, I think it is a authority that we have, just like we have authority over our agenda.
Mhm.
So I guess, and maybe what the thing is that we have to be willing to exercise that authority and to make sure that it's clear that we maintain that authority and that we want to know, we don't want procedural changes to be rolled out before we've had a chance to vet them.
Mhm.
With that, I mean, I don't know which other pieces of supervision, because in all honesty, I'm not sure I really know what all the pieces of supervision actually are, not having had to do it very much. I mean, supervising students is pretty different than supervising an employee by a big shot. But I'm not sure which pieces we need to spell out, other than that procedural one.
Yeah, and I think this is, I see Don Coburn's hand up, and I'm gonna speak, just to respond to Susan first, and then call on you, Don. I think this is part of the reason why I was always, or I've previously been opposed to sending out a memo without reviewing the job description and contract, which we wanna do for other reasons. And it's my understanding that whenever you have kind of a board and then an administrative professional, chief executive, that reports to the board, but then supervises the rest of the organization, that there's always this, kind of spectrum of how much anyone who's ever had a boss knows, there's certain things that you do, and something may come up while you're doing a task that your boss asks you to do, and you don't go back to them, you make your best decision, you make your best decision about what should be done. And then sometimes you go back and say, hey, here's the circumstances that I've arrived at, how should I move forward? And I think through my conversations with Melissa, a couple weeks ago, what I wanted to maintain was kind of the level that we've been operating on, of what, gets done as a in the moment decision. That is what administration is. It needs to happen. The business needs to keep on moving on, versus what comes to the board. I feel like we've been at generally a good place, and I don't want to change that and say, no, go ahead, we're gonna delegate all the supervisory authority to you, and don't come to the board with questions about how to supervise departments. Don Coburn?
Thank you. First of all, we have delegated to Melissa full supervisory powers. That's in the contract, that's in the description. So that's something we've already done. I think that it would be incorrect and not work out if you tried to frame in words the kind of distinction you're talking about as to when someone, a department head, should come to the select board if they're unhappy with the decision made by the town administrator. You can't put everything into words. What is important is that the board demonstrates that until there's a change, there's background sound that's interfering. Justin,
Background sound is interfering.
It must be, are other people hearing that? Lori and Melissa, are you hearing that?
okay. No, now it's not there.
Yes, they're not.
Okay.
It was your wife.
No, it's not there.
It was a
So
vibration.
you're not going to be able to find language to achieve that. What I think the board should do is simply make it clear to employees, department heads in particular, that Melissa is the supervisor. But if there's any dissatisfaction with anything that she does, the board stands always ready to hear the department head.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
It goes, to me, that would go without saying.
I would hope so.
And so I think, I mean, this does bring us to the reason why we are here and having this discussion, which is this proposed memo, which is meant to clarify the situation and the relationship between the town administrator and department heads, and indirectly, the relationship between the select board and town administrator. And that, you know, this didn't come out of the blue. This, I think, memorandum is asking us to lay out what that would look like. And I don't agree with what the memorandum proposes.
How would you like to see it changed?
Well, well, the first thing would be to add that, you know, the select board's role, and as I've stated before, well, we all seem to be somewhat unclear on what exactly is direct supervision. And I agree with Don Coburn to the extent that I don't think that that can be put clearly in words, or that if it could be, it would necessarily help. It's always a give and a take. But where do we generally set that limit at? And I feel like this is asking us to kind of move the limit in a direction that I don't think that it makes sense for the town to move it in. Melissa?
So I just wanted to remind you, Justin, that this memo actually came out of the mediation that you and I attended, that you agreed to bring this to the board to clarify my role. And that's all this is doing, is so that the departments listed here know that I would be the first person that they would reach out to as their direct supervisor if they need help with something, if they have a problem, all those kinds of direct day-to-day supervision things. Obviously, if there's some kind of problem, that's what we have HR for, and they would go there. And then if there's a problem beyond that, they would come to you. And just to add on, I'm going to be giving you guys direct reports however often you meet, whether it's weekly or every other week, so that the flow of information is still going to be there. This is to keep it out of the select board meetings, all this little day-to-day stuff.
So I agree, Melissa, that part of our mediation process was agreeing to send out a memorandum of understanding as to where the relationship between the town administrator and the department heads. It wasn't this specific one, and I always said that. And I think part of the mediation agreement was also reviewing the job description in particular with the board, and I think we agreed that the memorandum and the job description would reflect the will of this, or an agreement, I guess, in some ways between the select board and the town administrator to the extent that that's required by law. But my point here being, it doesn't need to be this memorandum, and it doesn't necessarily need to be this job description. And I think it's worth a review as to the relationship between the select board and town administrator. And that, you know, these things are subject to change, and we've already discussed some things that you would like to change about the contract, and some things that the board would like to change about the job description. And I was always of the understanding, once we came to that consensus, then, you know, or at the same time, we would write a memorandum to department heads.
So just make sure I get it, you're proposing that we look at the other things before this. I'd still like to see how, I mean, I would welcome seeing how you think we could change this to serve the purpose, and I get what you're saying, and that if we're not changing the job description, I mean, although fundamentally it comes down to what is supervision. And I don't know if we can't, and I agree with both of you, I don't know that we can spell it out in words. And if we can't spell it out in words, then we have to have a more gestalt manner of dealing with it, and hope that we can, through iteration and conversations, help all of us, including Melissa, to understand where that line is and what we'd like to make, to be part of, and what we're okay with not being part of, because that may change and evolve even, right? It may not be a static thing, I don't know. But I think that ultimately town administrators do have supervisory authority. So the question is, how do we sculpt a memo and or a job description that includes that role, which I think is part of that role, but still makes you feel like the select board has enough involvement.
Well, it doesn't have to be me, I mean, it's a decision for the whole board, I don't need to feel any kind of way.
No, I get that, but I feel like you're the one who's expressing that you're not sure where that line is, and I can't disagree, but I don't know where it is either.
Yeah, and also, Melissa, I see your hand up, and just one last thing was, and we discussed this at our meeting that we had, you know, a couple weeks ago, and then we discussed this at last week. And you mentioned again tonight that the flow of information will continue, and I think that that's good, and that's vital, but I think it's not just that we wanna stay up to date on how the departments are doing, but that it's not so much the flow of information as the flow of supervision, and how much supervision is delegated to the town administrator from the select board. And you have your hand up, Melissa?
So the way the memo is written right now, it takes it word for word from the job description. So if you approved it, all you're doing is solidifying, verifying what's in my job description, which is all I'm asking, because we do have namely one department that is being a little resistant to that. Every other department on there is on board with this. As Susan said, any significant change of the supervisory duties is going to require all parties to agree. And at this point, I agree with Susan. I'm not inclined to do that. I'd like to be given the opportunity to actually do my job and not be in breach of contract.
Not be.
Well, if she's not following her job description as stated and as hired for, it's a breach of her agreement. So,
Well, other than that,
I mean,
you know, that the job description generally emphasizes, and also on occasion says specifically, where is it, because it's in a weird place. The TA performs such other duties as may be required of her/him by bylaw, by vote of the select board, or vote of the town meeting.
But I think that's talking about adding duties, not removing them necessarily. That's how I would have interpreted it, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm a lawyer, but my point being, you know, we asked for other reasons, to review the job description and contract.
And
Well, not really
when
other
was that
reasons,
request?
Saul. What?
Who made that request?
The board.
There were, I mean, my basic thing was that the original contract had the PA supervising HR.
Mhm.
But that was in conflict with how we envisioned HR,
Correct.
and so that was the only change that
Mhm.
I thought needed to happen, because I think,
Okay.
you know, as you know why. So that was the only difference I had.
Okay. I think we have an HR and we have a TA, and it's time we let them do their job. We swim or we fail.
And at the end of the day, if we're
We don't
not
need to be
happy with how
In
the
charge
job
of
is
every
being
little
done,
thing.
yeah.
It's not the role of the select board. Let's keep our noses where it belongs. Let Melissa do her job. Let the HR do her job. If there are departments that fight it, well, then they will be the one that, as the hammer hits the nail, we nail them down and we get to the point. And the point right now apparently is everybody's on board but possibly one. Well, that one is the nail that needs to get nailed down. So let's make everybody do their job. That's what the contract says. That's what she was hired to do. That's what she wants to do. Everybody else is apparently on it. What are we pussyfooting around again? I mean, you know, it's time that the select board of this town of Monterey does the job they're here for and let other people do their job. We delegate these positions for a reason, so that we can concentrate on more administration, on the running of the town. Not sitting here wondering who's doing what to whom and how it's being done. If there's a problem, believe me, it'll come to the surface. So
Is that a motion, Scott?
my motion would be that we leave this right the heck alone. Issue the town of Monterey memorandum to the people that are listed on here and get on with business.
I'll second it.
Okay, is there any further discussion or comment before?
I'll add to this. To continue the conversation of job description and supervisory role to be brought up with the TA at some time in the future, that everybody can come together. We'll keep working on this as a group. But I think right now, let's just let this float. It's either gonna float or it's gonna sink. So we're a new town here. This is all taking shape. We've never had these luxuries. And let's realize that they are luxuries and take them for granted that that's what they are. We should be happy. 9 years ago, everything was done by the board and it was too much. Pull your hair out, but you couldn't get it all done. You couldn't get it all done in a week's time between 3 people. And now it seems like things are taking shape and getting done. And we've got the avenues to make certain that these things are channeled through correctly. Let's just let them happen. If they don't, it'll appear very, very quickly if there's a fault in the line.
All right,
And then we can respond.
so unless there's any further discussion or public comment, I'll call a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
No, so that motion carries, and the memorandum is issued, so that takes care of that. I don't know if you should have a clean copy to sign.
Probably you should, it doesn't have a number on too.
Yeah, I'll give you one on Friday when you come in to sign the bank loans.
Great.
Okay,
That's at 1?
Yes, and I just need at least 2 of you there.
At 1 o'clock this Friday?
Yep, for like 5 minutes.
We have to be there at the same time or just during the afternoon?
No, at 11 o'clock.
Wait, 11? I thought it was 1.
Yeah, didn't I just say that?
11.
So at 11 this Friday, you need 2 people here at the same time.
Yes.
Okay. Who shall
So-
be gonna be here? Sue? And is that considered a open meeting?
No, you're just signing loan documents. You're not deliberating anything.
Okay.
You can come at 11 and 11:05 if you prefer.
well, that doesn't really.
No, I just wanted,
Are you in town?
yeah, I work this out, right?
Well, I'm not in town every day, I'm in
I
town,
usually am, I
Yeah.
usually am.
Yeah, I'm usually not, most work days I'm not in Monterey. But I can occasionally come back. I said I was gonna be up in Pittsfield today and I didn't make it.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
don't be sorry.
11 AM, not
That's
1.
fine.
So you two will take care of that.
Melissa, will you send me a
Yes.
reminder, since I don't have my clock with me?
Okay. What do we have
Um,
to-
The next, unless you had something else to say, the next agenda item is 5B, which is amend Director of Operations and Town Clerk job description to correct direct report. Based on the last conversation, I feel like someone who agrees with these amendments can probably make a very simple motion with not a lot of discussion, and then we can call a vote, because we pretty much had this discussion.
Yes, I agree.
So I will make a motion to amend the job descriptions of the Director of Operations and the Town Clerk to report directly to the Town Administrator rather than to the Board of Selectmen.
And is there any other discussion or public comment before I will call a vote on the motion? There being none, we'll vote,
I vote yes.
Yes.
and no, and so that motion carries and the job descriptions are amended. 5C is Winter Recovery Assistance Program,
Didn't we do that last week?
they're a new one.
Oh.
We've actually done 2.
So this is the third one for the amount of $10,520.50 for crack sealing on Tyringham Road. I have the original, which I'll give to you on Friday to sign.
Sorry, Melissa, so how much does that leave in RAP, in the Winter Roadside Assistance Program?
I think it's about 30. I can pull it up if you need me to.
Okay,
It's not very much. It's like 30 left, I believe.
okay. I would
And I'll
move
have the
that the
form on
board
Friday for you.
approve this request for reimbursement for the crack sealing that was done.
Second.
Is there any further discussion or comment? There being none, we'll call a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And yes, so that motion carries unanimously, and we will sign that at a later date. 5D is designate local administrator for conflict of interest learning management system.
Yeah, so I know you voted
And-
last week, but it requires that you designate one person here to be responsible for that.
What is the designee?
What are the responsibilities of the said designee?
It doesn't list it. It just says who are you going to designate. So I would imagine most towns it's either going to be the town administrator or the town clerk, probably who is available
I heard
more
that.
frequently.
I'd make a motion that the town administrator take that responsibility until at least we know what the responsibilities are.
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah, second.
Second, yeah, okay.
Sorry, Melissa.
Is there any other discussion or comment?
No.
We're changing the job description. by doing this.
Well,
No, we're adding to it.
we're adding to it.
All right.
It goes under, what was it? O or something?
Other
Um,
duties as assigned.
Yeah.
but I always thought the power to appoint was the power to remove from employment, and the power to, add would be the power to remove, but I'm usually not right, actually, so. I'm not in
Don't
this
know
case.
about that.
We'll call a vote on the motion to designate the town administrator as the local administrator for conflict of interest learning management system. Susan,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
and Justin, yes, that motion carries unanimous.
Having just done that, it does occur to me that, we do currently have the clerk keeping track of COI performance. So would that mean that the local administrator would have to pass that information on to the clerk to make a record of it?
Well, we don't anymore. That's the
Oh, okay.
beauty of this system.
We don't have to keep
The
it.
state realized
Right, right,
we were
never
doing
mind.
so much work, and now
Right.
they are going to keep
Keep
track
track of it.
for us.
Excellent, alright, never mind,
Since it was all on the computer anyway.
right.
So now,
Bring me up on the COI.
so conflict of interest,
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that video training you had to do? When you get elected or appointed?
Yes.
Okay, so
Okay.
we used to have to keep track of who did it and who didn't and remind them. And
Now it's done
now
on
you
the-
tell the state when you
Right.
appoint someone or someone gets elected, and
And
when
they
you hire
have to go
someone,
through the state.
the state knows who's done it and who doesn't. The local administrator it did say a little bit about what the local administrator can do. They can send out reminder notifications and see who's done it or who hasn't, but at the end of the day, that information lies with the state rather than with the towns. The next item is process for town administrator job description revisions and contract negotiations. So based on the removing the HR function or changing the HR function in the town administrator job description and the subsequent requests by the town administrator for changes in the contract, I had sent them both to Donna. I thought I might have something for the board today, but I don't.
Okay.
I will follow up with her. Basically, the question at this point is how do we proceed? Because we have some proposed changes to the job description, we have some requested changes to the contract, and it becomes a whole negotiation process. So I'm waiting back to hear from Donna on how we do that. Update at a later time. The next item is American Rescue Plan Act proposals review process. So we had set a date that we wanted to receive all of our ARPA applications by my count, we've received 7 applications. Renewable Energy Working Group, the Police Department, the Moderate Priced Housing Survey from the Town Administrator, the Historical Society, the Highway Department, Mowing Tractor, the Green Park Playground from the Parks Commission, and the Community Center Pavilion from the Community Center Committee. And the question at this point is how do we wanna move forward in making decisions? Do we wanna delegate some of the work to a subcommittee? If so, who would be comprised of that subcommittee? Or do we wanna take up our proposals as a select board and come back next week or the week after that, or a special meeting and make some decisions? Because at the end of the day, we have requests that are higher than the total amount of money we have to give away, so we have to make some decisions as to where to allocate the money.
To me, that's a select board decision.
I'm gonna concur with that, I think so too.
So if it's a select board decision and we're not gonna delegate to a committee, how do we wanna proceed as a select board? Because I have a feeling if we just put it as an item on the agenda, it's not gonna get,
I think it's gotta be a
That was-
special meeting.
do we want to do a special meeting, or do we want to, like if next week is a light week, just say, the first item on the agenda is gonna be ARPA, and try to make some decisions, and if we can't, if we have further questions, we need to come back the next week, we'll do that.
Well, it may take us 3 weeks to get it organized, but let's do
I'm gonna
partly what it does
propose
here.
an alternative. I'm gonna propose that if next week's a light week, we even do it now, we have a conversation about what we think are, before we start going through each one, let's have a conversation about, okay, what items, like, if it's not something we can pay for with ARPA money, then it has to be excluded, right? That's an important one. What are the other things we think are important when we're looking at them? So that we can read them with those things clear in our minds about what are we looking for? What do we think is important? And then when we have the conversation, I think it has to, because that way we'll be able to come in having looked at them with those things in mind. So we have that conversation first, then we come together and we, having looked at all of them and having our thoughts about what we think are the priorities, we can have an informed conversation. And if we make that meeting just about that, and everybody knows it's just about that, if people wanna come and talk, if the people that have made the proposals are here, we can ask them questions. That's just what I thought of, but I'm sure you guys have ideas as well.
Yeah, I would just say that your first concern gets vetted through our TA. That anything that comes as an ARPA is stamped ARPA available. That way we're not even concerning ourselves with that aspect of it. And then we itemize them, look at exactly what the policy looks like here, not the policy, but the procedures.
So that
Not all
was
of
the
them.
TA's proposal, but for instance, I have a few differences of opinion on what I think of the most.
But I think you're on the right track.
So I think there's 7 proposals. My general understanding is that almost anything, if it's a general government service, can be justified through the use of ARPA. When they first came out with the funds a year ago, there were very strict very strict interpretations of what it could be used for. And then at some point, the Massachusetts said, you can count, I think it's $10 million. You can assume that your town had $10 million in lost revenue because of COVID. So 10 million of lost revenue in Monterey would be years
Twice our annual budget.
worth of taxes. But nonetheless, that's how it is. I think there's only one that I would even really have a question about. But I think for the most part, they could all be justified through ARPA, but we can have that discussion. I think for the most part, they are gonna fall in line. But I would group them, at the risk of oversimplifying things, into, there are
Give me your list, because I think there was one on your list that wasn't in my file.
community center pavilion,
Uh-huh.
Lighting,
building a
No,
pavilion.
building. I have an update on lighting,
Yeah,
if
well-
you'd like, but let's save it till later.
but no, I read that.
The Green Park Playground, the Highway Department mowing tractor, the Historical Society, the Moderate Priced Housing Survey, the
So-
Police Cruiser, and the Renewable Energy Working Group. And at the risk of oversimplifying things, I think they can be kind of grouped into three groups, which is that there's 2 requests from town departments to purchase vehicles. There's
Right.
the mowing tractor and the cruiser. And they're both significant, or each a significant chunk of the money. I think the cruiser was about 50,000 and the mowing tractor was about 90,000, including the attached mowing deck. And I think the board may decide that's how we wanna spend the ARPA funds, but they also may be the type of things that if we don't spend ARPA on it, they can get added into the capital plan.
Mhm.
So there's that. There's 3 requests that are for a relatively small amount of money from the Renewable Energy Working Group, the Moderate Price Housing Survey, and the Historical Society, all I think in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 or less $1,000 that are for basically getting projects underway. And I know with the Renewable Energy Working Group, we have a couple, as Peter updated us today, they have a couple different things going on. And this would be an application for, or it would help a study of or a consultation and planning services. The only hang up I see with the Historical Society, I'm not sure it is, but I think we should be aware that it's the Historical Society, which is a private nonprofit, not the Historical Commission. So that's just something to be aware of.
Are we allowed to do that?
We did purchase with some of our funds a vehicle from, no, actually, we just donated our funds
Oh,
to
right.
Southern Berkshire Ambulance,
But we had to do.
a sub-grant
Right.
recipient agreement, which, so that, learning that lesson, I don't think it's necessarily out of the question
Okay.
because it's a private
Right, right.
nonprofit, but it's just something to be aware of. And then, so that would be those 3, and the Moderate Price Housing Survey, I think it was only 4,000. So those are 3 kind of smaller requests for basically consultation. We wouldn't get any, physical building or physical vehicle
Right.
out of it. And then there's the Community Center Pavilion and the Green Park Playground, which are the 2 highest money amount items.
The mower's right up there too.
The mower is right up there. The mower actually is right up there, cause 90, and so maybe even higher than the pavilion, but I think the playground total request
It's about 100.
is about 100. Yeah, 98,271.
And 20 grand a piece of equipment. Cause there's 5 pieces of equipment. I think there's 7, but 2 are tiny.
The pavilion request is for 85,000.
Can we get 3 photos instead?
So that's lays out the 7 that we're working with. And we can put it on a future select board agenda and we can also continue to talk tonight about what generally we're looking for in the. Here's another thing, is that we are not necessarily limited to fulfill this request or not. We may say, we can't do that amount for that project, but maybe we can give some money towards that project, depending on applicability.
The tricky thing then comes if you don't give the full amount, whether what happens if they can't find the remaining funds?
So I guess I'm more envisioning, for instance, the playground. Like maybe we wanna spend $98,000 to get a completely new playground, and that would be definitely a gift to the town and the young families in the town. And that might be the way we wanna go. We may also, decide we allocate some of the money elsewhere and we have a portion of that money. And we don't redo the playground, we don't redo every element, but we do something to make the playground nicer, to renovate the playground. We have a lot of options.
So do we wanna talk about what we think the priorities are? What process do we have some consensus on? Talking about, do we wanna talk about what we think the priorities are? Do we wanna have a meeting dedicated to just doing meetings? Cause I agree, I think if we have a whole full agenda, like, this is gonna be a long discussion, because there's a lot of proposals. Even 7, I think, is a lot of proposals.
Yeah.
So what are you guys feeling in terms of process?
Let's try to dedicate next week's meeting, first hour towards that, and then if it needs to go towards another meeting to get
Through the list,
through the list, we can do that.
what do you think?
I think that works. Is next week not the,
No,
No,
it isn't,
the
because we
first-
moved it, right?
so it's at
Yeah,
6
yeah.
p.m. So that might be good.
Just so you know, because there's a noon conflict management seminar next Wednesday. And in order to allow it, that you can sign up for, it's an MMA one. It's remote, you don't have to leave your house. Just kidding. We moved next week, which is normally the noon meeting, to 6. And the second week is gonna be the midday.
Mhm, yeah.
I did say that correctly, right?
Next week is 6 p.m. following.
Correct.
is noon.
Right, and in that following week, we also have the Kamama Half Moon folks coming.
Yes.
And we have hopefully a meeting with Sophia if her scheduling Barrington will allow.
Oh, is that the case?
Well, cause I believe that,
That was
second Wednesday, has slightly different hours
That's
because
why
of,
she was gonna do 1 o'clock.
right,
It's all coming back to me. So, I don't know if Melissa's still there, but what I will do is reach out to Kamama Half Moon and get them at noon.
I already sent
No.
Sophia an email asking if she can switch to noon, so I'm waiting to hear back from her.
but if she can't,
We'll do Kamama Half Moon at noon. I think
Right.
they're pretty flexible. They've actually been good. The
okay,
only mistake I made with Kamama Half Moon was telling them that we have a noon meeting and then saying, but if you wanna meet sooner than a month from now, we could meet at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. And as long as they heard there was a noon meeting once a month,
They were there.
they wanna be at the noon
Okay.
meeting.
Who doesn't?
Okay,
Okay, so if so for ARPA, we will do next week.
okay,
And then
but do we
two.
wanna work on the proposals next week, or do we wanna talk about ranking next week?
I think work on proposals, because
Okay.
as much as it's a theory and concept of what in theory should we spend money on, it's a concrete of
This or not this, okay,
the next item is mail and correspondence letter from the library regarding town clock. I'm gonna recuse myself from this discussion because it directly impacts the finances of a family member. And although I'm not required to leave the room, I will.
okay,
Next to us.
I'll just, but I can't make a decision by myself, don't do this to me. Essentially, as I understand it, I'm trying to find I know I have the document, I'm
If you
gonna
want,
find
I
it here.
have it.
No, I
I
have
have
it,
it right here.
I got it
It's
right
in,
here.
it's in your pile,
You have a
Susan.
copy? I know, it's in the pile, I can't find it in that written pile, but I have it on the online pile, no problem, it's at the end of this document.
Do you have a copy, Scott?
So,
This one here.
It's 8A.
essentially, yeah, have you
I read it, I read it
Okay.
at home.
So, when this came up last week, of course, I couldn't do anything by myself, because Just has to recuse himself. Melissa and I have previously talked about it even before, Mickey raised it, because having heard from Mark that there were these, the minutes before, as the staff is setting up and the minutes as they're closing down, he was concerned about cost overruns, and Melissa and I looked at the numbers and felt like we could find the money in the budget to pay people for their work. And I personally feel like if people are working, they should be paid.
Yeah.
We changed the transfer station and added minutes before and after shift for setting up and closing down, because people should be paid for their work.
Mhm.
And it's not a huge amount of money. Do you remember what we calculated it was likely to be? Melissa?
I think it was like $2,500 tops, but that depends on how they're calculating the time. So item
Right.
2 in my email needs to be resolved first.
Right. Whoops, too far. Alright, so there's two parts, right? One is the staff being paid and the other is the monthly meetings, correct?
Well, yeah, and I was just, so can I just explain this?
Please do.
Since actually, I realized after I was here and I'm going like, did I say that was to the finance committee from me or from the board? And I realized that I said I would come here and I wrote it the next day, because we had the meeting on Monday and then I came Tuesday to the joint meeting. And I didn't present it to the board, although it expressed what we were talking about, so officially the writing is from me, okay? But what happened at our meeting was we were discussing this and the board was really getting just like anxious. And the other thing is, we were knowing that we were gonna go over our budget, which we always try not to do. I think last year
Thank you.
last year was the first time that we ever came, I think, in my time, for extra money towards the end of the year. But now it's October and we know that we're gonna go over. And I think as a responsible board, we should say, hey, finance committee, keep in your mind, right on the bulletin board or wherever you keep this, know that this year the library is gonna have to come for money. Because to me, that's a responsible thing to say. If I know it now, I might as well tell you, rather than come to you third week in June and say, oh, we ran out of money in payroll, so you better fork some up or nobody's gonna get paid next week. And that was one of the reasons that we wanted them to know, and we want the finance committee to acknowledge that, yeah, we see that's gonna happen and we're okay with it, we'll cover it. That's all this was about.
Okay.
That's all it was about. And when I was typing it, I thought about, when we have these mandated minutes, these mandated meetings, that's gonna add an extra amount of time. I mean, Mark already has, his timing is crazy. You're sure you do it now. You got a cell phone with you, you're always doing things while you're supposed to be hammering a nail and you're answering somebody's questions.
I told them it's $50 an email and they hang up. You'd be surprised at how that works.
I gotta try that.
I had somebody wanted to dispute a trash bill, which I never got paid by either anybody for doing this trash billing. And it was $1 charge on his bill because the trash man said it was nasty, which meant it got scattered around. And he says, I blah, 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 yeah. And I said, well, I could research that, it would cost you $15 for a $1 charge.
Yeah.
He said, I'll pay the bill.
Really?
So, anyway,
Is the time clock the problem? I mean.
no, it's not the time clock.
Yeah, I was gonna
It's
say, how
just,
does
we
that become
just,
the issue?
it's not that we're seeing we're gonna do, we're gonna work it out. How Mark is gonna work it out is, I don't know. But I think he and Melissa have talked about it already, and maybe he's talked to you, Susan, as well. But I had just thought about this, going to the mandated meetings. If he's spending the day mowing lawns up on Beartown Road, I don't know where he works anyway. And has to come down for a meeting, it's really not an hour. He's down here for an hour. But he's actually, the other thing is, and I didn't think of it that's figured on his library pay. And he takes an hour off or 2 hours off from working on his real work, I certainly hope he's getting paid 2 if not 3 times more than he's making from the library. So I only figured at that rate, and I never brought it up to anybody else, but that just came to me the other day, and I'm going like, oh.
So
Because
there's two issues. One is the scheduling, the meetings, not interfering with his livelihood. And the second is the actual cost of the meetings in terms of
Yeah,
if he's here, he can't be doing library work in the hour that the library is paying.
if he was working at the library, but if he's
Right.
working at his other job,
Right,
he's losing
but
that.
that's the scheduling issue, right? It's because
Yeah.
if it was scheduled if
Yeah,
we were able to schedule it so that it was during his library work hours, but not during library open hours, right, cause then there would be no coverage. That part might not be the issue, but there would still, I mean, it's still an hour out of his month, that's true.
You know, it's a, anyway, but that, and I just threw that one in, I think after I had the whole thing typed anyway.
I think the time clock issue is more that, historically, they've paid per shift, but the time clock reveals that in fact, the shift is expected, they're paid for a certain number of hours in a shift. But the time clock reveals that in fact, there's minutes before the shift to open the library, and minutes after the shift to close the library, but we should be paying them for that, so. And that's okay, this is something that gets revealed by changes and then you deal with it.
So how was it always done before? If your shift was, say, noon to 3, did they put in 3 hours and 10 minutes?
No, they just put in 3 hours.
It was shift time.
Well, God bless them, we're still a small town.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how much I give away, every organization gives away.
I do too.
I mean, that's part of being a community, is that 3 minutes it takes to unlock the door and get in and putting the heat on and this, that, and the other. Sure, it's part of your job. Should they be compensated for that? I'm not saying no by any means. It looks like it needs to be a budgetary issue
Yeah,
that
I mean,
we
and let's see.
raise. You know, we just cover it, that's all.
And I think for this year we cover it, and for next year it'll be in the budget.
They'll have to figure it out, you know, how much it's gonna be roughly, and then add a little percentage to it.
I mean, that's what the finance committee is for, is that they find ways to cover.
And that's
Expenses.
all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Apprise the finance committee early, now that we know. We are going to have from, let's say, the beginning of November, whenever it is that we start the time clock, till the end of the year, till June 30th, that each shift is gonna be longer. And so it's gonna have to be money that we won't have, because we usually send a very tight budget.
Well, loosen it up a little bit, why are you guys so
I would.
I mean, I'm not trying to be,
No,
footloose and fancy free, but we're not talking a huge amount.
I would have little bumpers in my budget.
Well, every budget needs that, right?
Well, that's me.
I mean,
Some other people wanted like, no, it only cost us $50, it doesn't cost us $60. But maybe 75 would be a good number to have in it, just in
it's either
case.
that or you adjust your hours, especially during the winter months. Is perhaps you take 1 hour a week off the whole total that you're open. I mean, I don't have the answer.
Yeah, I don't know, if that would be people get very set on times, you know? You are used to,
Well, people also
You know, and then
get used
you get-
to,
you get
people
to
get
car-
used to change, so
yeah,
it's
you
just,
get to Carl Hardware and they close early on Sundays and you go, damn, I forgot it's Sunday and they close early.
Yeah.
They're open to 6, they're open to 5, not 6. I have done that.
So,
Here.
just in recognition of the other issue, I do think it's important that we recognize that Mark does have a livelihood that mostly involves not the library,
Yeah,
and that the scheduling the meetings, we have to find a way to accommodate that, so
well,
we're
it would
not.
always be scheduled, it would probably be better not to schedule while he is scheduled for there, because otherwise we have to somebody else there.
Right, but he does work more
Oh,
hours for
yes.
the library than he does
Right.
open hours for the library, so the question is
So
whether we can
when would it
find a
be?
way
Yeah.
to accommodate that, and obviously there's a seasonal factor
Well, and there's
so he's doing
also,
discretionary hours.
He is, he does
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
discretionary hours, but the question is when those hours are, and we wanna try to schedule the meeting in a way that
So
doesn't,
the-
that allows him to fulfill library duties and doesn't impact his other
So
hours. Are you
then that,
okay?
then that
I
begins.
just got it cramped in my thigh.
Oh, I hate
Then
that.
that begins
You could say bad
with
words
the
on the mask.
communication between the TA and Mark.
Right.
Or the board and Mark.
The other thing is you have, building inspector, who also isn't in town all the time. And, I don't know, is Sean Tryon, as the fire chief, is he involved in those meetings? Because he's another one who is not in town. I think, like the director of operations, police chief.
Melissa?
Take a big hand.
First, everybody's getting very wound up and we haven't even set the date and time yet because I'm trying to speak to everybody to find out what their availability is. So with
Yeah, but I'm
regard to
just saying,
Mark,
those are people that have to be,
and I'm
But she's
aware of that,
aware
Nikki,
of who
thank
they
you, thank you,
Yeah.
yes. So with regard to Mark, I did send him an email asking him what his schedule was at the library, and his response to me was that he works Monday 7 to 9, Saturday 9 to 1, and 7 to 9, which is a total of 8 hours. Now he's paid for 23 hours, so I think that means he has 15 discretionary hours. So I will follow up with him and ask, when does he do those 15 discretionary hours, so that Sophia and I are not interfering with his regular work schedule. So, and then we can
Yeah.
talk about that further. As for the
But I-
staff, I think the board needs to clear up one thing first, because last week Mickey said that the staff gets paid from the minute that they open the door and then the minute they close the door. And that's not how it works in all the departments here. Like the highway department doesn't get paid the minute they pull in the driveway. I don't get, well, I'm not hourly, but when I was hourly, I didn't get paid the minute I opened the town hall door. I had to come in and then I would clock in, and same in the reverse. So I think if that's cleared up, if they're currently
well,
being
yeah,
paid,
I just, we wanna know that,
so
what that time frame is.
if they're currently being paid from when they walk in the door before they even
No,
get to the, okay, so that there likely isn't going to be a problem then, because it's going to take them a couple minutes to get to their computer and log in, and the same on the reverse.
the first thing they do is not turn the computer on, though. They can turn
But
on lights,
so maybe they
doors.
need to revise the order of things that they do, maybe.
Well, yeah, we'll have to look into it more deeply to see how we can arrange that so that they can log in when they're inside or whatever.
Right.
But
So
I think-
before
I think
the
you're
finance
gonna
committee
find
or
it's
select
fewer
board,
minutes than you think it is.
right,
But I
before
still
anybody
5
makes
to
any
7, when
decisions about
they say 3 to
going
5.
over budget.
It's not a whole lot.
No, I don't think it is, and I think it'll be fine.
Here's what I say, figure it out. Figure out the best method
Yeah.
between you and Mark and the town administrator to get this thing to work. If there's a slight overage this year, we'll cover it and we'll find a way to cover it. And if it's something that shows that it needs to be added to next year's budget or modifications to time or how you guys organize your time, that's the route
Then
we
we'll
need
have
to
to,
take.
we'll certainly know about it by then.
I think that covers everything that we need to cover. It's just a matter of, it's a learning experience, once again. We're learning new things and we're experimenting. And if the experiment works, great, and if it doesn't, it'll show itself. I think it's just a matter of timing.
Timing.
Steve Martin.
Alright, are we good?
Yep, so
All
as
right.
long as the finance committee knows that we're gonna be asking for money,
They do,
And-
cause you gave them the letter and
and
Michelle said
that's-
they'd continue.
yeah. but, never mind.
I think it'll be okay, and I think the meeting thing is gonna work out too. Let's give it a chance, and it's not even till January that it's gonna start, so.
Oh, good, then we can talk about it 2 more meetings.
Yeah, oh goody, thank you.
No, me and trustees.
Special town meeting,
What about it?
can't ask with any money there,
We already had it.
that's when I was sick.
Yeah.
I wish somebody told me.
They probably did.
I mean,
You
I was
wouldn't
sick.
take my phone calls or
No.
you didn't answer my
No, I was
emails?
not.
We
I'm reading it and I'm thinking, that's special town meeting.
I
What
know.
happened?
Yeah, it went, I,
I
you know,
It's fine.
apologize to all
it's
the.
okay,
town
and
administrators.
it went very smoothly. It was the shortest special town meeting ever, it was like 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was what, 4 items.
I know. And they weren't contentious. The hardest thing was clarifying what the legal fees were for and adjusting the amount. That was the hardest thing.
For
So,
Jeremiah.
For Jeremiah.
Yeah, that was
For Jeremiah
12
and
of the 15 minutes.
for Jeremiah and for the other thing. Would you mind to go grab Justin? Because I think we're done with that. Oh, here he is. Thank you. Welcome back.
Alright, so
So we're closing the library.
that's all, that's all the mail and correspondence that we have on the agenda. I'm not ready to do the minutes.
Okay.
The open meeting minutes. We're going to have to figure out how, so Lori has been sending us draft minutes. And we're going to have to figure out how to get the edits together. Maybe we will each edit it in Word as we've been doing it and send it to Lori, and maybe we'll each edit in Word as we've been doing it and send it to Melissa.
Do we have a preference, ladies?
I mean, it certainly makes it easier if you send them to me, but I'm not getting the copies at all yet.
Yeah, so, we mentioned that last week, and so we'll add you onto the list. Or Lori, please, when you send out the minutes, send them to Scott, Susan, myself, and Melissa. Yeah.
I sent everything over to you, Melissa, this evening. So you should have all the
Okay.
minutes.
Great, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
and so then we will make amendment as we've been doing, and then send them to Melissa to be printed out for the meeting, and then do it like the normal procedure.
Okay.
So that takes care of that. I'm not ready for the minutes tonight. But, the final, it ended up in the final, Jan, it's down there, but revision to the minutes of 9:28. So Tom Sawyer reached out to us.
Yes.
And this is the way that I have it drafted up, you can see what I deleted, but memo to the planning board, rezoning bylaw error. Susan reached out to the planning board and has had several communications about whether a camp for year-round use is a by right use in the Lake Shore District, or whether that is just a typo in the most recent copy of the printed zoning bylaws. Tom Sawyer reached out to the previous planning board chair regarding the matter, and the previous chair said that the planning board at the time made a change as they felt it was better for the town. The current planning board is still researching this item. It was basically a wording change because Tom had emailed the previous chair and had gotten a response, and I think somewhere between Tom telling Susan, Susan telling the board being down, put out on the minutes being edited, somewhere along the way, it read a different way that a change was made in direct contradiction to a town, without town meeting, when it should have gotten town meeting. And that may have happened, but that is not Tom's understanding or the previous planning board chair's understanding. And since it is quoting how Tom recounted, anyways.
So I just wanted to, this is my latest email to Tom, and I wanted to give you guys a copy. I'll send you one electronically, Melissa.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with John Levin, about it, because, him being a land attorney and all. And essentially, it does seem as though since the town passed the bylaw that created the category, it didn't exist before that in 2009, and made it by special permit. But we don't have any written version of the zoning bylaws that include that. The first time it appears in any version anyone has been able to find that is written is in the 2012 edition, where it appears for the first time as this new category as by right. So since that is not what was passed in the 2009 bylaw, and there was no other, at least I looked at every special town meeting and annual town meeting from 2009 forward, it was never addressed again. That category of camp recreational year-round was never addressed in any way again at a meeting. So I essentially think that because it was never done as it was, as what we passed, it doesn't exist. I think the best thing to do is to just remove it from our bylaws until we go forth and address it again.
One question I have for you is, the 2009 STM made. Don't let me-
Created the
don't-
category.
Created the category of camp for year-round use in the Lake Shore District.
It can't,
And
it created the camp for year-round use altogether, because that
Not in the
category
Lake
didn't
Shore
create,
District.
it addresses all 3 districts. It's not allowed in the business district, and it's by special permit in both the residential and the Lake Shore District.
Based on the certified town meeting minutes,
Based on the certified and the AG's response, yes.
based on the warrant.
It's posted on the, you can go look for, you don't have to take my word for it, you can go look.
No, but I'm just trying to.
Yes, based
get
on
to
the
bottom of
warrant,
this.
the minutes, and the AG's response.
Based on the warrant, the minutes, and the AG's response.
Correct.
2009 special.
2009 April special, there was more than one that year, SDM, I believe.
And so it's on the warrant?
It is on, it's on
As
the warrant,
a
and then
camp-
the discussion's
a
actually
camp-
on here.
No, in.
Do you want me to read it? Article 5? So the
This
town
is a certified town
this
meeting
is a
minutes.
certified town meeting minutes, right?
Who was the town
Meeting
clerk?
minutes, 2009, who was the clerk, it was at the bottom, okay.
Barbara.
I knew that already, I don't know why I had to check, but I did. So, Article 5, the town of Monterey voted to amend the zoning bylaws of the town by adding a new use category for, quote, camp and or recreational facility, seasonal or year-round, as noted in the warrant. The report of the planning board was as follows. Planning board report regarding addition of a new use category. Camp and or recreational facility, seasonal or year-round. The Monterey Planning Board held a public hearing on March 12, 2009 at 7:15 PM at the Monterey Town Hall to receive public comment about the proposed zoning bylaw. The public notice of the public hearing was advertised twice in the Berkshire Record on February 20, 2009 and February 27, 2009, and a copy of the bylaw was posted at the town clerk's office. 5 members of the planning board and several town residents attended the public hearing. The proposed bylaw was discussed and the comments and recommendations from the public were considered. The purpose of this bylaw is to create a new use category for a camp and or facility whereby a property would be able to conduct a camp, sports camp, recreational facility on a seasonal basis or on a year-round basis. Currently, our zoning bylaws restrict such use to a period from Memorial Day to Labor Day. This use would also include a place to conduct meetings, functions, and events. This bylaw would be allowed in both the agricultural residential district and in the Lakeshore district. Approval of any proposed function under this bylaw would be by special permit from the zoning boards of appeals with all the usual findings required. The planning board voted unanimously in favor, recommending approval of this bylaw at town meeting. Thank you, Cynthia T. Hoots, planning board chair.
Wait, can I hold you up for 1 second? So I am very curious to get to the bottom of this, as are you, and
You asked me to read
as
this
well.
already.
Yeah, let's waive the reading of this
Okay.
entirely. I do want to read it myself, but
No
go
problem.
back up.
Yep.
Do notice that planning board chair who signed
Was
off on
Cynthia
that
Hoots.
is different from the planning board chair.
That's right,
Yeah.
right, but my point is, this is what the town passed. But our current zoning bylaws don't reflect that,
The printing error,
the
the omission.
printing error. In 2012, the planning board commissioned a revision of the written bylaws, they got a professional to come in and do it. So Maggie Leonard was chair of the planning board when that occurred. And it's the 2012 edition in which this category appears in written form for the first time, but as by right in the Lakeshore District. So that is why Maggie they inquired of Maggie.
And so as far as minutes go, I know we want it to be what Susan said at the meeting. I think then if you said that, it should reflect, the change should reflect Susan said that, and not that Tom Sawyer said the previous planning chair said it. But why don't we table this till.
Okay.
Table this until, because I understand where you're coming from saying, it seems to me from all these sources that it was changed not at town meeting. But if we want that in the minutes, it shouldn't say Tom Sawyer reached out to the previous planning board chair.
So what happened
said
was
that?
I spoke with Tom about it, and Tom reached out to Maggie, and Maggie responded, and Tom sent me that response, and in that response, that's what was really in question, that he's, that response seemed to indicate that the planning board may have made the choice when they redid the 2012 minutes.
And
To
that's
support
what,
that
that's what you're saying though, right? It's not what Tom said or what the previous planning board. chair
My
said, it's what-
interpretation of what Maggie said, based on the email I received.
Yes, but that's all that should be clear in the minutes,
Correct.
is that it's what
Yes,
you were saying.
it's
about
my
the situation.
interpretation of what Maggie said in the email to Tom, that Tom sent me.
Alright,
Is
so
that
let's take,
complicated enough?
let's
I don't
take that
think so.
up, let's take that up at a future meeting. I didn't
Correct.
realize there was more to the story until.
There's always more to the story.
Unanticipated business, one thing is, I told, Steve Moore asked if he could change the article we sent him about Fiber Connect.
Mhm.
Are we on board with it?
I don't know if you saw, I'm certainly on board, I think it makes sense.
If you two have read it and seen
Yeah.
the change.
It's a small change, are you okay with it?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I don't think it needs it, but.
I
We
think
will-
it's
I'll tell Steve
because-
Moore to go ahead with the change.
Yeah, editors like anything.
Okay.
The community center lighting, we received, communication from Joe Baker,
Mhm.
and we can deal with it next week, but also I know you had responded to it, I didn't know if we wanted to discuss it this week
I can
as
just tell
unanticipated
you,
business.
right, I can just
Or
tell
next
you,
week.
I had a conversation with Melissa and Jim have spoken with National Grid. And National Grid is willing to put up light poles on the community center grounds, that would be LED, dark skies compliant. The current small holdup would be that there's a new set of, I think it's software or hardware, I'm not sure, that if we wait for it, and they're expecting it to roll out in the next few months, would allow it to be programmed so it wouldn't have to stay on all night, but could be turned off. So it would be downward facing, LED, energy efficient, dark skies compliant, and programmable, woo! So that would be great,
And it
Joe's
won't
still
cost
working on that.
29,000.
Yes, and it will be cheaper. So yeah, I think it would be great. We just have to figure out what we can do in the interim to make sure nobody gets hurt, but that's phase 2. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that's good.
So I don't know if there's anything to act on, and if there is, we should probably hold off till next week.
It was just a communication,
Yeah.
that's all.
Oh, I read it.
I do have one other thing, which is I would like permission to talk to the insurance council, because I have a communication that I'm concerned about, and I would like to speak to council.
Yeah, I think if that's. Yeah, I mean, the other thing about insurance council is
They're not paying hourly,
we're not
but
paying
I
hourly.
didn't wanna do something without notifying you
Yeah,
guys that I
I
was.
think that
What is that? Shoot.
request a
Town
contact.
council request form.
This is now how select board.
Because there has been abuse of use of council.
Yes.
We've, yeah,
Don't I know? Scallywags.
I love that word. But I will, Melissa, if you would be kind enough to send me the contact information for the insurance council, that would be great.
Is this with regard to the current issue?
Well, it's regard to a new communication I received today.
So we only have counsel if it's with regard to the lawsuit?
Yes.
Maybe you should just talk to me about it tomorrow, so I know where to direct you to.
Yeah. Wait, so, yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know if it's special counsel, I'm trying.
I don't know either. And, you know, if I'm not yet named on the suit, then maybe I can't talk to them.
Yeah, I
But
don't know.
I'm concerned that I will be if I don't.
Okay, alright, are there any comments and questions from the public?
Must.
I have a comment, an
Don
appeal.
Coburn.
Yes, thanks, Justin. I don't think you may be aware of this, but although the informal atmosphere of the board is welcome, there is a lot of over talking, not just in this meeting, but in past meetings too. And I would ask you just to consider being a little bit more formal so that it goes person by person instead of people talking over each other, which makes it hard, I think, for the recorder to make notes and hard for listeners to follow what's happening. Thank you.
I got a lot of room for improvement in keeping people in order, and they have to identify themselves. And, yeah, I mean, Don, I gotta agree with you.
I think he's referring to the board itself.
To
Well,
both.
chair who moderates
both.
the discussion.
I'm referring to both. It would just be helpful if you can do it without it becoming too formal a thing.
All right. No other comments or questions from the public? Ellen?
Well, last week I came to ask for a written statement of where the board stands on the year-long complaint that Terry Walker filed against me and my complaint filed against her in response, but also sort of
Yeah.
anyway, and
Ellen, we're not gonna discuss complaints
So
against
I
public officials without inviting them. We
well,
can't.
no, it's
It's a complaint
not
by
against
the
her, or
public
forget
against
the
her.
second part then, just the one
Yeah,
against
but you
me.
did,
Okay.
you mentioned that.
Okay, sorry, so I just needed to ask if I could get it in writing, and it seemed to me at the end of the meeting that although you had made a statement that worked great for me, that it was inactive and it was not pending, et cetera, you didn't, take that next step to say, yes, it would be in writing. So I'm back again to ask that it could be in writing to me, so I could feel that it's closed, no longer pending. It was what you said anyway, but.
Yeah, I said I'd take it into consideration, and I didn't write up anything for this meeting.
No, that doesn't have to be for this meeting, but I didn't want it to get lost. I looked for the recording, but I guess it's not on YouTube yet.
Not
to
yet.
get the
It had to be edited, but we have that process figured out now. Thank you, Melissa and Tom Roy, and
Okay, so
it will be up sooner than later.
so
if I'm
do
not
I
mistaken.
just wait now to hear back from the board as to a written confirmation of what was said orally last week?
I don't know. I said, to put something in writing, I mean, I'd probably consult town council and probably should have before I even said anything to you.
Well, it's
And
fine with me,
unfortunately,
yeah.
I don't, we've said, I thought it was made clear from the beginning that it was out of the jurisdiction of the select board. And that's it.
Okay, well, that wasn't my understanding, and so if that's the case, I'm delighted to hear that. I still would like that to be in writing. And this is a new board, and I wanna be sure that it's still not pending with this new board, that's all.
You're the only one that was here when this all
Yeah.
occurred, so, it's hard for me to have a comment on something that I wasn't here for.
It is.
Right, so, I
What
try
about-
to have
what
some
about-
evidence, Scott, please.
Yeah, what about what the planning board did back in 2012?
Well, because I did research on that, because somebody asked it,
Yeah, no.
Well, somehow it dropped the ball. Somehow the ball was dropped on that, so.
but if a complaint was made and it was considered outside the purview of the town because it was by an employee against a member of the town.
The select board, and this is something that happens not infrequently, which is that people contact the select board, and I think it's good that people do, and oftentimes people bring problems or questions to the select board that the select board can handle and can do something about it. That's kind of a wild idea, a select board that can do something about problems. But, sometimes people bring things to the select board that aren't in our purview. And so someone, made a comment about the lighting at the library, and I let her know, I'm gonna pass it on to the library board of trustees, that's really their business. Or if it's about the planning board, especially, or if it's a police matter, But generally, that's how, as far as the conversation goes, it's not a select board thing, and that's that.
Right, I guess if an employee makes a claim against a citizen, but it's not a legal claim through the police, but within the town and accuses them of something, what part of the town, what is the town responsible to do? Do they need to reply to the citizen? Do they need to act on the complaint? I mean,
Well, my general understanding is that if someone were to come to a town-owned building with town employees and do something illegal, to town employees, then that would really be a police matter, because they're breaking Massachusetts law.
right,
Um,
but the person in.
but we hold our employees accountable through the handbook and through employment best practice, and we're responsible for their actions. But how can we, discipline or members of the public? So if, other than that, the police could say that they broke the law. But if someone comes in and, to the assessor's office and says, you appraised my house, or assessed my house incorrectly, how do we go from there? If they make a threat against the assessors for assessing their house incorrectly, then that would go to the police. But short of that, I mean, what are, I just feel like it's not the role of the select board to act as kind of, I just don't think it's in the role of the select board, that's all. I could be wrong.
I'm not sure I disagree, but if an employee makes a claim about a member of the public harassing them, but doesn't file a police report or go through the police, but gives it to the town being the select board or the town administrator, what responsibility does the town or the select board have to look into that claim or act on that claim? I'm not saying I know, I don't know, I'm saying I don't know the answer.
Well, wait a minute.
Wait 1 second, Don, I gotta recognize you if you wanna speak. I just don't know, Susan, and it's really a question for town council, if it's going to be asked, and it's really,
Did it get asked when it occurred?
I don't really know, because I wasn't really communicating with, that would have been probably Steve, if anyone, who had asked it. But the general consensus of the board at that time was, we were not going to take up complaints against private citizens. Because if they had broken the law, that should go to the police, and short of that, we don't manage private citizens, we manage town employees, and we have enough on our plate to just do that.
That's.
Am I gonna be recognized?
Scott speaking first time.
You just said, it. We don't work with the citizen because we have no control. We do have control over what our employees do and say and act. And if an employee makes a threat or a claim, a false claim, or even if it's true but doesn't follow up on it, we, I believe, have the right and the authority to go to that person and get to the bottom of their concern and get that hammered out. So here we would put that person, I would imagine, onto the trail of our HR, and they would have to sort that out, because that's kind of how we have it now. So if I didn't like Mickey and I said something to her and she was offended by it, her recourse would be to ask the board to please have me censured and send me to the HR department, of which they would then get to the bottom of it and then bring that possibly to the board, or they would do it. It's the exact same system, it's the system that we have in place.
But the situation's the other way. If Mickey yelled at you and you said Mickey was harassing you, then what happens? Because we don't, right? Then we have no.
Well, I don't know the scenario.
No,
but I don't know
I'm just making it up, but I'm just saying, if it's the other way, if it's the town employee who's claiming a citizen did something offensive to them.
I still think they should get sent to the HR department to figure out what their complaint was, and if it's justified, then they should have gone through the police. And if not, somehow I believe that person, regardless of who it was, should maybe even still be asked to clarify, quantify, drop, apologize, do whatever, or continue along. One of the three, you know, poop or get off the pot sort of thing, right? I'm sorry if I'm.
No, it doesn't offend me.
You know, that's kind of where it's at. So I think that we might have, the board should have at that time, in my opinion only, sent the complainants to the HR department, but at the time we didn't even have an HR department.
But now we do,
Now
so
we do.
it's a little late, but we could act on that.
Don Coburn?
Yeah, I think in your remarks, Justin, you're ignoring a settled precedent in the town. When I was on the select board, the employees at the transfer station complained that a woman was coming, a citizen was coming and threatening them and otherwise misbehaving. And we took action on that. We advised the woman that if she continued in that conduct, she would not be permitted on town property. In particular, she would not be permitted to go to the transfer station. So we have shown that we can take an action where a citizen does something inappropriate. Where an employee does something inappropriate, it may be complex, but there are certainly circumstances where you, as the responsible body in charge of your employees, if you have an employee who is doing things that are wrong and that are upsetting citizens, you can take disciplinary action against that person, regardless of what other courses of action might be available. Thank you.
Thanks for your input, Don. I'll take it into consideration. I move that we adjourn.
One second.
Vote on the motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, unanimous, meeting adjourned at 8:46 PM.
I didn't get a chance to add my last comment.